What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time to look at the best and worst case scenarios for Texas in 2023. Is Texas back? I definitely think they're one of those teams that they're a boom or bust team. Let's just put it that way. They are a team that has potential to do really big things this year, and I've already heard some people make some predictions about Texas, maybe even being a playoff team. But we've also seen them struggle the last several years in games that really they should have won. And is that going to continue? That'll be the big question. So a big boom or bust potential here for Texas. Let's get into it. Let's look at the schedule again. Of course, they play Alabama in the non-conference. I say non-conference. Remember, that'll be a conference. That would be a conference game in 2024 with Texas going to the SEC. But they'll play them in the non-conference. You look at their conference schedule. Road games against Baylor, Houston, TCU, Iowa State, some tough places to play there. Oklahoma, they'll play, of course, in Dallas, which means they get 5 home games. They get 4 home games, 4 road games, and then the 1 neutral site game. So again, pretty tough schedule with Kansas State and TCU on there. Also Texas Tech, also Oklahoma. So I've kind of went through and named the 5 top teams in the Big 12 as Texas, Oklahoma, TCU, Kansas State, and then Texas Tech. And so they're going to play all 4 of those other teams that I think are in the top 5 of the Big 12. So that definitely is a tough schedule there. And then, of course, Alabama in the non-conference. But I feel pretty confident that they're going to beat Rice, Wyoming, Kansas, Houston, and BYU. I put Kansas on here. But, to Kansas, if you look at this Kansas team, they've got a lot coming back. I just think that the talent level of Texas is just going to be too much for a team like Kansas, Houston, or BYU. So you feel pretty confident in those 5 games, but the other 7 games, there's potential. There's potential for Texas to lose all of those games. Baylor on the road, Oklahoma in a rivalry. I know the game wasn't close last year, but they didn't have their quarterback at Oklahoma, and that made a big difference. Kansas State and TCU, we know those are the 2 teams that went to the Big 12 championship last year. Iowa State on the road is always tough, and then Texas Tech, a rivalry. That one's going to be tough as well. But when you look at this schedule and you look at these games, is there any game on this schedule that you would say Texas has no chance? Texas is definitely not beating Texas Tech or not going on the road and beating TCU. I don't think so. In fact, I think Texas will be favored in every game that they play except for Alabama. I just think that they will be viewed as the top team in the Big 12. And I think they probably are the best team in the Big 12 going into this year. I know talent-wise, you look at their roster, they have the best roster. You look at the offensive firepower, you look at Quinn Ewers, back when he was healthy last year. This offense was really, really good. Same thing with Xavier Worthy. He was hurt last year. If they can stay healthy this year, this offense is going to score points. And their defense was actually much improved last year. They were better on that side of the ball. I don't know if they're going to be quite as good as they were last season, but I think the defense should be solid. The offensive line, that's one of the big areas where they really improved last season. Something that Texas had kind of struggled with. So you look at this team and this roster, all the pieces are there, and really there's not a game on here that I'm going to say Texas can't win. So I think their best case is 12-0. I really feel like they could possibly go 12-0. I'm not saying that they will. That game against Alabama is going to be a tough one, obviously. I almost went with 11-1 just because you look at that game against Alabama, you look at the game at TCU, you got some tough games in here. Can they really win them all? Well, I don't necessarily think that they will win them all, but there's no reason to think that they can't win them all. So I think 12-0 is possible for Texas. Beyond that, I think it's going to the Big 12 championship. I don't know about them winning a playoff game. I'm not sure if they're going to be quite to that level. You never know. You never know. They could possibly, if they get there, win a playoff game, maybe even win the national championship. I think more than likely, best case probably is just getting to the playoff for Texas. But again, you never know. But yeah, regular season, I think best case is 12-0 and at least 11-1. If you're not buying the 12-0, I think you would at least, everyone would have to say there's a chance this team goes 11-1. So how about the worst case scenario? Well, you look at these other games. Could they lose them all? Now, I don't think so. I don't see any scenario where they lose all 7 of these games. I don't think they're going 5-7, but you do look at some tough games. Like I said, I could see them losing to Alabama. I could see them possibly losing to Baylor on the road. Oklahoma, rivalry game, you never know. Kansas State at home. I kind of lean towards Texas in that game. I lean towards feeling confident, let's put it that way. TCU's not going to be as good as they were last year, but that game's on the road. Iowa State's a tough place to play, but I don't think Iowa State's going to be able to match up. So I really don't think Texas, I don't think they're going to lose that game. Texas Tech could be a tough one there to close out the season, but they get that one at home. So you look at these games, and how many of these could they realistically lose if things just don't go their way? They were 8-4 last year. I'm going to say worst case scenario, they don't improve at all and they go 8-4 again. I just don't see this team going backwards. I don't think they lose more than 4 games. Again, even the worst case scenario. And I just picked out 4 games here. Of course, Alabama, that's the one everyone's going to point to. You got Oklahoma just because it's a rivalry game. The Sooners, I think, are going to be much better this year. TCU's on the road. And then Texas Tech, they beat them last year. This is going to be a good Texas Tech team. So you could maybe see them losing those 4 games. Or maybe they lose to Baylor on the road and they beat Texas Tech, or they lose to Baylor and beat Oklahoma. Maybe they slip up against Kansas State or Iowa State. Any way you want to look at it here. Now, I think the worst case for Texas would be 8-4. So I think this team is at least going to be as good as they were last year, have the same record, but they have the potential to go 12-0. Do they split that? Do they go 10-2? And if one of those losses comes to Alabama and they win the Big 12, is that enough to get into the college football playoff? I think it's enough to get into that discussion. I don't know if they would get in or not. So maybe 10-2 is the most likely scenario for them. But like I said, best case, 12-0. Worst case, 8-4. Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.